So picture this. You're sitting in a boardroom.
Okay, setting the scene.
Right. The AC is humming, the projector is glaring in your eyes, and the CEO just asked this really pivotal question about the quarterly strategy.
A high-stress moment for anyone, right?
Exactly. And, in your native language, you would have the answer queued up instantly. Like, you'd sound like a total genius.
You'd have all the nuance.
Yeah, you weave in the nuance, you'd command the room, maybe even, I don't know, drop a subtle, clever joke in there.
But this meeting is in English.
Yeah. And as you open your mouth, your brain it completely betrays you.
Oh, yeah. The freeze.
The sophisticated vocabulary that you possess, it just vanishes. Your mind freezes. You default to the linguistic complexity of like a fifth grader.
Right, just basic fragmented sentences.
Yeah, you just stumble through this really basic response, and the moment passes. The opportunity is just gone.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the question is, why does human cognition do this to us?
It's so frustrating.
It is. Why is there this agonizing, really kind of humiliating gap between the complex ideas we can understand when reading and what we can actually produce on the spot?
Well, so it really represents a fundamental breakdown between data storage and data retrieval.
Okay, break that down for me.
So we acquire this massive reservoir of passive vocabulary, right? Over years of reading, watching films, studying grammar.
Sure, we recognize thousands of advanced words.
Exactly. But when your neurological system experiences the stress of real-time communication, especially in these, high-stakes professional environments, it triggers a mild survival response.
Like a literal fight or flight kind of thing.
Basically, yeah. The brain just abandons the intricate, energy-intensive process of hunting for that perfect word, like synergy or coalesce.
Because it takes too much energy.
Right. And it forcefully routes you to the path of least resistance. It grabs the simplest, safest words available just to survive the interaction.
Wow. So you have all the parts to build this beautiful sentence, but the assembly line is jammed by your own stress.
That's exactly it. Your own physiological stress response is jamming the machinery.
Which perfectly brings us to the target of our deep dive today. We are exploring this fascinating piece of source material. It's an excerpt from a specialized curriculum called Pod Zone, Mastery of Advanced English Articulation.
By the instructors John and Emma.
Right, John and Emma.
Yeah.
And I want to make it super clear right up front, this is emphatically not a standard language lesson.
No, not at all.
There are no, grammar drills here, no lists of phrasal verbs to memorize.
What John and Emma provide is, it's really a highly technical blueprint for cognitive reengineering.
Cognitive reengineering, that sounds intense.
It is. Their methodology is designed specifically for learners who are trapped in that frustrating intermediate to advanced plateau. The explicit goal here is achieving C2 advanced mastery.
So taking that massive, dormant, passive vocabulary and doing what with it?
Forging it into an active, elite-level communicative arsenal, something that can be deployed with, total professional gravitas and physical poise, no matter how much pressure is in the room.
And they start by attacking the root cause of that boardroom freeze-up we just talked about, right?
Exactly. Before they even introduce a single word of practice dialogue, they demand this complete overhaul of your psychological framework.
Yeah, John introduces this concept right at the beginning. He frames the ultimate goal as viewing English not just as a tool or like a subject to be studied. He calls it an intellectual sanctuary.
Right. And the word sanctuary is key there. It implies a place of absolute safety and control.
So what does an intellectual sanctuary actually look like in the brain?
Well, John defines it as a cognitive domain where ideas flow unimpeded by pressure or hesitation or apprehension. Because if we look at the typical environment where a second language is tested, a job interview, a presentation, the dominant emotional state is usually vulnerability.
Oh, for sure. You're hyper aware of the potential for failure.
Right, of mispronouncing something or just looking foolish in front of your peers.
It's that terror of being perceived as less intelligent than you actually are, simply because your vocabulary in that one specific moment is restricted.
Yes, and that terror triggers the release of cortisol. And cortisol actually impairs the function of the prefrontal cortex.
Which does what exactly?
That's the very area of the brain responsible for executive function, complex thought, and crucially, the retrieval of nuanced vocabulary.
Oh, wow. So it's a literal chemical block.
Literally. So John and Emma's philosophy focuses on reversing this neurochemical reality. They advocate for a state that Emma calls relaxed absorption.
Relaxed absorption. I like that.
You have to actively build a mental space where engaging with English feels entirely organic and deeply safe. If the brain feels safe, the cortisol drops, the prefrontal cortex opens back up, and the higher order vocabulary can finally surface.
Visualizing this gap between the passive and active vocabulary, it feels to me like the passive side is this massive, incredibly dark library inside your mind.
That's a great analogy.
Right. For an absolute fact that the books, the advanced, elegant words, they're in there. You spent years buying them and shelving them.
But the lights are completely off.
Yes. The lights are totally off. So when that CEO asks you a question, you are essentially stumbling around in the pitch black, frantically running your hands over the spines of the books, just desperately hoping to pull out the right one before the conversation moves on.
Exactly. And the intellectual sanctuary that John advocates for, that's the mechanism for turning the lights on in that library.
So it transforms the internal landscape.
Yeah, from a place of frantic blind searching into a well-lit, quiet room where you can see every title clearly. You have the luxury of time, mentally speaking, to select the absolute perfect text.
But looking closely at their text, there is this glaring internal tension that I feel like we have to pull apart here.
Okay, what do you mean?
Well, Emma and John are instructing the learner to adopt this mindset of relaxed absorption, right? To let their mind be this placid lake of calm.
Right.
But in the very same breath, they are continually using terms like elite-level communication and commanding a room with professional gravitas and performing in high-stakes social environments.
I see where you're going.
Yeah. Framing the ultimate goal as elite and high stakes seems guaranteed to trigger the exact performance anxiety they're trying to eliminate. If you keep telling me I need elite professional gravitas, that placid lake is suddenly going to have whitecaps.
That's a really fair point, but the paradox is actually intentional.
Really? How so?
The text resolves it by drawing a really hard line between the environment of preparation and the environment of performance.
Okay, so separating the practice from the real deal.
Exactly. John and Emma acknowledge the reality of the business world. It is undeniably high stakes. You can't change the pressure of a boardroom, but what you can change is how your nervous system interprets the vocabulary required for that boardroom.
Oh, interesting. So they're decoupling the stress of the environment from the words themselves.
Precisely. Emma explicitly instructs the learner to adopt the mindset of relaxed absorption during the practice sessions. She emphasizes progressing slowly, deliberately, organically.
So doing this in your living room.
Right. The curriculum is designed to be executed in a controlled, low-stakes environment, listening to the audio on your couch or sitting on a quiet park bench.
You're simulating the usage of high-stakes, intimidating vocabulary within a deeply relaxing context.
Exactly. You can't construct a sanctuary while you're actively under attack in a corporate meeting. You have to build it during peacetime.
Okay, that makes so much sense.
Yeah.
You are intentionally building a muscle memory of deep calmness while, physically speaking, highly complex words.
Yes.
So by doing this repeatedly in your living room, you rewire the association. Then later, when the external environment actually is high stakes, your brain accesses those advanced words and simultaneously triggers the feeling of safety that you built during practice.
The words themselves become the trigger for the sanctuary. It's basically classical conditioning applied to advanced linguistics.
Wow. And to initiate this conditioning, to start installing the wiring for those lights in the library, the curriculum introduces a very specific, intensely physical mechanism, right?
Yes. John and Emma utilize a highly specialized C2 level iteration of a technique known as shadowing.
Now, shadowing is a term thrown around quite a bit in online language learning communities. Traditionally, it just means playing an audio track of a native speaker and repeating what they say a fraction of a second later.
Kind of like a parrot mimicking sounds?
Right, exactly. But Emma immediately clarifies that shadowing at their required level is entirely removed from mere mimicry.
Because mere mimicry is just a superficial acoustic exercise. It's echoing noises without any real cognitive integration.
So how does she break it down?
She breaks down their specific version of shadowing into a 4-dimensional process. She states it involves internalizing linguistic structures, attuning the mind to think natively, training articulatory muscles for specific phonetics, and conditioning the ear to decipher the microscopic subtleties of prosody and rhythm.
The physical dimension of this is what I found profoundly interesting. John literally instructs the learner to, quote, take a centering breath and find a comfortable posture before even attempting to speak.
Which is so rare in language textbooks.
It is. It suggests that vocal apparatus calibration is treated with the same level of importance as knowing the definitions of the words. We tend to conceptualize language as this purely intellectual phenomenon.
Just invisible data packets moving around inside the brain.
Exactly. We forget that speaking is a biomechanical athletic event.
It really is. Spoken communication requires this astonishingly precise, rapid-fire coordination of the diaphragm, the lungs, vocal folds, tongue, lips, hard palate, jaw. It's a lot.
Right.
And when a learner attempts to speak at an elite C2 level in a non-native language, they're commanding their facial and respiratory muscles to execute microgymnastics they have never historically performed.
Because the physical hardware of the mouth is optimized for the phonetics of their mother tongue.
Exactly.
So if the brain perfectly understands the word coalescing, but the physical muscles of the jaw and tongue have never actually formed the specific syllables of coalescing fluidly in a sentence, the execution is just going to fail.
Yeah, the mouth will physically stumble, regardless of how smart the brain is. The brain sends the electrical signal, but the muscular hardware is not calibrated to receive or execute it smoothly.
So that's what the centering breath is for.
Right. The breath and the postural adjustments John demands, they serve to disengage the default physical tension in the vocal apparatus. It relaxes the muscles so they can be reshaped.
So when Emma discusses training the articulatory muscles, she is talking about literal physiological muscle memory.
Yes. The mouth has to be trained to move in the exact physical pathways of the English language before the brain can hope to think fluently within it.
Which brings up a really critical distinction regarding this intense focus on prosody, rhythm, and phonetics. Is this methodology simply an elaborate way to scrub away a foreign accent?
That's a common misconception.
Right, because is the goal merely to sound aesthetically indistinguishable from someone born in London or New York?
Yeah.
Or is there a functional cognitive reason for this physical obsession?
The text makes it very clear that native-like rhythm and precise phonetics are not aesthetic vanity metrics. They are absolute functional necessities for spontaneous eloquence.
Functional necessities.
Yes. Emma asserts that this rigorous physical conditioning trains the automaticity of the thought process itself.
Okay, automaticity. Being the neurological ability to execute a complex task without occupying the conscious mind with the low-level details.
Like driving a car on a familiar route, right?
Exactly. You suddenly realize you have no memory of the last 5 miles because the subconscious handled the pedals and the steering while your conscious mind was thinking about what to make for dinner.
Exactly. And applying that to language, when the articulatory muscles possess the exact physical memory of how to produce a complex sentence, and the ear is fundamentally attuned to the natural cadence, it liberates an immense volume of cognitive bandwidth.
Because you aren't fighting your own mouth.
Right. The learner is no longer trapped in that exhausting loop of consciously translating a concept from their native language and then consciously forcing their uncalibrated mouth to pronounce foreign shapes.
The physical execution just becomes a subconscious automated process.
Which bypasses the mental translation phase entirely, allowing your conscious mind to focus 100% of its energy on the substance of the ideas rather than the mechanical friction of conveying them.
So the physical mastery of the mouth generates the cognitive freedom for the brain. That is exactly like learning to touch type on a keyboard.
Oh, that's a flawless parallel.
Right. When you first learn, you're staring at your fingers, painfully hunting for the T and the H.
Yeah.
You can't think about the essay you're trying to write because all your brain power is consumed by the geography of the keyboard.
But once automaticity sets in,
The fingers know where the keys are blindly. The keyboard vanishes from your conscious awareness, and you can finally focus purely on the narrative you're creating. So John and Emma are basically teaching the mouth to touch type.
that's exactly what they're doing. And before they ask the learner to use this newly calibrated physical apparatus to shadow complex business dialogue, they insist on laying down a very specific psychological foundation.
So they don't just throw you into boardroom jargon immediately.
No, not at all. They begin with an introductory exercise they term forging linguistic anchors.
Ah, the affirmation stage. This is the first practical shadowing exercise in the curriculum, and it feels remarkably different from anything you'd find in a standard language textbook.
It really does.
Emma delivers this series of very deliberate, slow, rhythmic sentences for the listener to shadow. The script reads, and I'll just read it here, "My command of English is perpetually evolving. My articulation is gaining poise and precision. I am integrating a more sophisticated lexicon into my daily discourse."
The meta nature of the vocabulary used in those affirmations is the key there.
Yeah, it's so meta.
Right. They aren't instructing the learner to repeat simplistic motivational phrases like, I am becoming very good at English, or, I will learn hard words today.
They are forcing the learner to utilize C2 level academic vocabulary to describe the literal process of acquiring C2 level academic vocabulary.
Exactly. Perpetually evolving. Poise and precision. Sophisticated lexicon.
You are actively practicing elite English by articulating how elite your English is becoming. It just loops back on itself. But John explicitly warns the listener not to view these merely as self-help motivational tools. He defines them clinically as linguistic anchors. So what is the actual mechanism of a linguistic anchor?
Well, John's analysis posits that these anchors force the brain into a state of receptive and confident learning.
Okay, Jose.
By demanding that the physical vocal tract articulate its own evolution using the exact elevated vocabulary it's attempting to master, the exercise creates a neurological self-fulfilling prophecy.
Walk me through the mechanics of that prophecy. Like, how does speaking the phrase change the actual neurological state?
So in applied linguistics, there's a concept known as the affective filter.
The affective filter?
Yeah, it's basically this invisible psychological barrier constructed by anxiety or low self-esteem or a lack of motivation. When the affective filter is high, it literally blocks comprehensible input from reaching the language acquisition center of the brain.
Wow, so you can listen to English all day,
Yeah.
but if you're anxious, the brain just won't absorb it.
Exactly. The door is locked. But when a learner verbally declares with physical calmness and postural poise that their articulation is gaining precision, they are sending biofeedback to their own nervous system.
They are anchoring the physical sensation of relaxed confidence to the physical act of speaking complex English.
Yes, and this process violently lowers the affective filter. It overwrites the historical programming of hesitation. The brain is tricked into embodying the state of a master, making it vastly more porous and receptive to the more difficult exercises that follow.
It perfectly mirrors the pre-game visualization routines of elite athletes.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about a downhill Olympic skier. They don't just stand at the starting gate staring blankly. They close their eyes, physically lean their body into the imaginary turns of the course, and they often murmur specific cues to themselves about their speed, their edge control, their power.
Right, warming up the neural pathways.
Exactly. This affirmation stage is the exact same technology, but engineered as a warm-up sequence for the language centers of the brain. The learner is visualizing these steep, complex conversational slopes and physically warming up the muscles before they ever push off the starting line.
The linguistic anchor primes the entire bioneurological system. And once that system is fully primed, the affective filter lowered, the confidence anchored, the articulatory muscles warmed up. The curriculum introduces what is arguably its most fascinating practical exercise.
And certainly its most unconventional, the kitchen exercise.
The practice of quotidian narration.
Yes. Now, I have to admit, when I was reviewing this section of the source material, the inherent absurdity of it is striking.
It is a bit out there at first glance.
Right. John and Emma are instructing the learner to take this fiercely elevated C2 level English and apply it to the most mind-numbingly boring, mundane moments of daily life. Emma paints this scenario where the learner is simply standing in their kitchen making breakfast, and she provides specific shadowing script to narrate that trivial experience.
Yeah, the exact script Emma provides requires the learner to shadow the following calmly and deliberately. I am preparing my morning sustenance. I awoke today with a sense of clarity. I am steeping some tea, and my thoughts are coalescing around the day's imperatives. I am resolved to elevate my use of English today. My mind is primed for acquisition.
Okay, let's play this out in reality. If I walk into my kitchen at 7 a.m., look at my spouse and announce, I am preparing my morning sustenance, my thoughts are coalescing around the day's imperatives, they're going to assume I am rehearsing for a 19th century stage play.
Laughs internally. Yeah, it sounds completely bizarre.
It sounds ridiculously over-engineered for the act of putting a tea bag into a mug of hot water. Why utilize deeply academic, boardroom-level vocabulary for the act of scrambling eggs?
The immediate reaction of absurdity is entirely natural, but the text explicitly defines this as an internal mental exercise or a practice conducted in absolute solitude. John categorizes this as a mechanism for maintaining cognitive presence in the target language.
Cognitive presence, meaning the active refusal to let the brain default back to the native tongue just because the physical task is simple.
Precisely. Because when a person is engaging in a highly routine task like making tea or brushing their teeth, the conscious brain just goes on autopilot.
Sure.
And for a language learner, the internal monologue during that autopilot phase will inevitably default to their native language.
It's just easier.
Right. By enforcing a rule to narrate the mundane in English, the learner builds the endurance to think in English continuously. But the genius of the exercise lies in the extreme contrast.
The contrast between the vocabulary and the task.
Exactly. By intentionally deploying these heavy, complex words like sustenance, coalescing, and imperatives to describe low-stakes, simple activities, the learner is stretching their lexical range in a completely safe environment.
Because the environment dictates the cognitive load.
Exactly. Think about it. If a learner attempts to deploy the word coalescing for the very first time in their life during a high-stakes board meeting while simultaneously trying to defend a controversial quarterly report.
The total cognitive load is catastrophic.
Yes. The brain is trying to manage the stress, manage the business logic, and manage the unfamiliar articulatory mechanics of a new word. The system will crash. The learner will stutter.
But if that same learner has practiced the specific muscular mechanics and absorbed the semantic weight of the word coalescing 50 times while standing alone in their kitchen watching a tea bag steep.
The word is no longer a threat. It is a familiar, physically comfortable tool.
Wow.
John argues that this absurd descriptive practice trains the automaticity of the English thought process. It short-circuits the brain's instinct to translate because the elite vocabulary has been hardwired to the most foundational, everyday actions.
The absurdity is not a bug. It is the core feature. The massive contrast between the high-level vocabulary and the low-level activity is what makes the neural pathway highly memorable.
It really does.
It functions exactly like resistance training in athletics. You wear a heavy-weighted vest while simply walking around your house doing chores. The body adapts to the artificial gravity. Then, when you take the vest off to run the actual sprint on the track, you feel impossibly light, fast, and powerful.
The kitchen exercise is wearing the weighted vest of C2 vocabulary.
That is such a great way to look at it. And the brilliance of John and Emma's progression is that they don't leave the learner isolated in the kitchen talking to themselves.
No, they have to transition eventually.
Right. Once this internal baseline of cognitive presence is established, the text immediately provides a bridge. It offers a blueprint for how to scale this sophisticated language out into the real world, specifically targeting external social interactions.
Yeah, they move from the private sanctuary to the public arena, focusing on elevating micro-interactions.
Micro-interactions. These are those brief, seemingly inconsequential moments of small talk with colleagues or clients, right? The moments that almost universally rely on the most basic, worn-out linguistic templates.
Like when a colleague passes you in the hallway and asks, "How was your morning?"
Yes, the global default response for a language learner, and honestly most native speakers, is some variation of, "It was good, I got up early, I read some emails." But John and Emma present a radical rewrite of that standard script.
Emma provides the specific alternative for the learner to practice and internalize. She says you should say, "My morning was characterized by a tranquil efficiency. I rose early, prepared a cup of tea, perused my correspondence, and then organized my materials for the day."
Characterized by tranquil efficiency. Perused my correspondence. I mean, it is a monumental upgrade in sophistication.
It really is.
But crucially, unlike the kitchen exercise, it does not sound theatrical or robotic. When deployed in a professional setting, it just sounds incredibly put together.
It projects immediate, undeniable authority. And the cadence of those specific words forces a behavioral shift in the speaker.
How so?
Well, think about saying, "My morning was characterized by a tranquil efficiency." You physically cannot rush through a multisyllabic, conceptually dense phrase like that the way you carelessly throw away a phrase like, "It was good."
That's true. It forces you to slow down.
The phonetic weight of the words demands a slower, more deliberate pacing. It commands space and attention within the conversation.
It's the linguistic equivalent of choosing to wear a bespoke, tailored suit to the office instead of sweatpants.
Oh, I like that comparison.
The sweatpants saying, "My morning was fine."
Right?
They accomplish the basic functional goal, right? They cover you. They answer the question.
Right.
But the tailored suit saying, characterized by a tranquil efficiency, fundamentally alters the aura of authority and competence you project to the listener. You're passively signaling to your colleague that you are composed, highly detail-oriented, and in total control of your environment. And just like wearing a great suit, it changes how you carry yourself
Exactly. The external projection of competence reinforces the internal feeling of confidence. And the text provides another highly strategic script for these micro-interactions, targeting a moment that is historically fraught with anxiety for learners.
Which moment is that?
The moment someone actually inquires about their language acquisition journey. When a native speaker asks, "How is your English coming along?" the overwhelming instinct for a learner is to adopt a posture of humility, to downplay their skills, or to preemptively apologize for any mistakes they might make.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, my English is still so bad. I'm sorry.
Right. But John offers a script designed to completely invert that dynamic and project absolute mastery.
Let me find that one. Yes. John's prescribed response is, "My engagement with English has been notably consistent of late. My primary focus is on expanding my lexical range and enhancing the lucidity of my speech."
The structural brilliance of that script is how it functions as live performance art.
Performance art.
Yes. Emma explicitly notes that utilizing this phrasing demonstrates control, intentionality, and commitment to perpetual improvement.
Oh, I see. By deliberately employing terms like lexical range and lucidity to describe the mechanics of your own learning process, you are providing immediate, undeniable proof of your high-level proficiency right in that very moment.
Exactly. You aren't asking them to believe you are improving, you are forcing them to witness the improvement in real time.
It is the ultimate manifestation of show, don't tell. And going back to the physical shadowing mandate, the curriculum requires the learner to practice these exact conversational scripts slowly, focusing intensely on the natural intonation and physical posture.
They're building the muscular memory for projecting authority.
Right, so when that coworker inevitably asks, "Hey, how have things been?" the learner's nervous system does not trigger the panicked scramble for basic words. It triggers the smooth, automated deployment of the tailored suit. I'm dedicating significant effort to honing my skills.
The panic default is entirely overwritten by an elite default.
But, a static wardrobe of tailored suits will eventually wear out. To sustain this level of external eloquence over a lifetime, you can't just rely on the finite scripts provided in one curriculum.
No, you'd run out of things to say pretty quickly.
You have to transition from practicing provided material to actively gathering your own new data from the environment. You need a systematic method for continuous, independent acquisition.
Which necessitates the transition to the next critical phase of the methodology. John and Emma introduce a highly specific protocol for gathering this linguistic data, and they root it in yet another universally mundane daily activity.
The commute.
The commute, yes. The curriculum leverages the transition time between the private home and the public workplace to install a new cognitive filter, which they term the art of intentional observation.
Emma introduces this phase by providing a transitional internal monologue, a script to shadow while sitting on the subway or driving or walking to the office. She instructs the learner to internalize. I am currently en route to my workplace. The ambient conditions are pleasant. I am contemplating the conversations I will navigate today. My objective is to articulate my thoughts with superior clarity.
The narrative framework is shifting significantly here. The focus is moving from internal self-reflection, making tea in the kitchen, to outward environmental preparation.
Yeah, the phrasing ambient conditions and conversations I will navigate signals that the learner is beginning to project the safety of their internal intellectual sanctuary out into the unpredictable external real world.
Exactly. And following this transitional script, John and Emma introduce the core mechanics of intentional observation, which is an intense exercise in directed focus.
The internal dialogue Emma provides for this specific exercise feels like unlocking a cheat code for continuous learning. It's like a manifesto for active predatory listening.
Predatory listening, I love that.
The script reads, "Today I want to be more intentional with my linguistic development. I intend to pay scrupulous attention to the idiomatic expressions people employ. I will observe how native speakers construct fluid, cohesive sentences, and I will endeavor to incorporate this new vocabulary into my own conversational repertoire."
John isolates 5 specific action verbs and adjectives from that manifesto, claiming they represent the psychological keys to instantly elevating a learner's communicative trajectory. Those 5 words are intentional, scrupulous, observe, endeavor, incorporate.
Unpacking those 5 words is vital because they aren't just random selections of advanced vocabulary. They outline a highly aggressive, specific state of mind.
They outline the psychological transformation of the learner from a passive receiver of environmental noise into a hypervigilant architect of their own fluency.
So intentional means what?
The word intentional signifies the end of accidental learning. The learner is no longer hoping to absorb English by sheer proximity. They are hunting for it with a specific purpose.
And scrupulous.
Scrupulous is the key modifier. It denotes a microscopic, painstaking, almost obsessive attention to detail.
Right, so when you are scrupulous, you aren't just absorbing the general meaning of what someone is saying. You are forensically examining the architecture of their speech. You're looking at the joints, the hinges, the transition words they use to connect two disparate ideas smoothly.
Exactly. And that forensic examination is followed by the three-step mechanical process. Observe, endeavor, and incorporate.
So the learner silently observes the native speaker's structural choices.
Makes a conscious, determined endeavor to retain the specific phrasing.
And then physically incorporates that phrasing into their own subsequent conversations.
Yes, it is a systematic process of identifying high-value linguistic assets, stealing them, and assimilating them.
Now, a logistical hurdle immediately presents itself when looking at this demand for scrupulous attention.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
How can a professional realistically maintain a forensic, microscopic attention to the architectural structure of someone's sentence without completely losing track of the actual business conversation they are supposed to be participating in?
It sounds impossible, right?
Yeah. If a manager is explaining the nuanced timeline of a critical project, and the learner is hyper-fixated on the manager's elegant use of cohesive idiomatic expressions, the learner is going to miss the actual deadline for the project.
The danger of cognitive overload in that scenario is absolute. If a learner attempts to scrupulously analyze every sentence of every conversation throughout an 8-hour workday, their brain will exhaust itself by 10:00 a.m. and their professional performance will just plummet.
So what's the solution?
The solution lies in John's foundational directive from the very beginning of the curriculum, the requirement to progress slowly, deliberately, organically.
The return to the concept of relaxed absorption.
Exactly. Scrupulous observation is not meant to be a frantic, all-consuming state of panic. The commute exercise is designed to simply set the intention for the day. It primes the reticular activating system in the brain to notice patterns it would usually ignore.
So how does that look in a practical application?
Well, a practical application means the learner might select just one low-stakes conversation during the day. Perhaps a casual coffee break with a colleague where they consciously shift merely 10% of their cognitive focus from the content of the speech to the form of the speech.
10%.
Right. They notice one elegant transition phrase. They mentally pocket that single phrase. They endeavor to incorporate it later that week. Through consistent microdosed application, that scrupulous observation gradually becomes an automatic subconscious background process.
Entirely identical to the physical articulatory muscle memory we talked about earlier.
Yeah, exactly.
It is deeply analogous to how a professional musician listens to a piece of music. An average listener hears the overarching melody and the lyrics, right? They experience the song as a single block of sound.
Sure.
But a trained bass player cannot help but hear the intricate bass line running underneath the track. They don't have to strain their brain to isolate it. Their ear is permanently conditioned to track those low frequencies automatically, while they simultaneously enjoy the entire song. The commute exercise and the concept of intentional observation is about conditioning the learner's brain to become that linguistic bassist.
That's beautifully put. The auditory system becomes specialized. And this relentless combination of methodologies, we've dissected the physical shadowing to rebuild the biomechanics of the mouth, the linguistic anchors to systematically dismantle the affective filter, the internal quotidian narration and the kishin to enforce continuous cognitive presence, and the scrupulous, targeted observation of native speakers. All of these distinct tools converge to address the final, ultimate objective of the curriculum.
They are the requisite weapons to shatter the final barrier to true mastery.
Yes, the ultimate boss battle of language acquisition. The methodology culminates in an attack on the most notorious trap in linguistics, dismantling the B2 plateau and achieving pristine clarity.
The B2 plateau. The source text identifies this specific developmental hurdle with agonizing accuracy. Emma defines the B2 to C1 or C2 plateau as the prolonged state of possessing a vast, passive vocabulary that fails to manifest in spontaneous conversation.
Which circles perfectly back to the exact frustration we identified in the boardroom scenario at the beginning of our analysis.
The vocabulary is intellectually owned, but it evaporates under the friction of real-time speech.
Right. And it's widely considered the most demoralizing phase for any advanced learner.
Oh, absolutely. You can easily watch complex documentaries, you can read academic papers without a dictionary, and you feel like you're putting in endless hours of study. Yet when you open your mouth, your spoken output remains stubbornly frozen at a slightly clunky intermediate level.
The input does not match the output.
You feel fundamentally trapped inside your own head.
And breaking out of that trap requires a total redefinition of what fluency actually means. Emma articulates the ultimate ambition of the curriculum in a very profound way. She states that the goal is not merely to speak faster, but to communicate entirely without the cognitive lag of translation.
Without the cognitive lag.
Yes. The objective is for the English language to surface automatically as an organic extension of daily consciousness.
An organic extension of daily consciousness. That phrase requires a massive paradigm shift in how we view language learning. Because most learners view a second language as an external application. They have to consciously double-click and launch inside their brain every time they need it.
Right, like an app on a computer.
Exactly. It takes time to load, it crashes sometimes, and it runs separately from their native thoughts. Defining it as an organic extension means English is no longer an app. It has been integrated directly into the brain's base operating system.
It becomes a native function. And John reinforces this ultimate state of being by having the learner shadow a final, definitive statement of intent. I aspire to articulate my ideas with pristine clarity and poise in any given context.
The phrase pristine clarity is highly specific. It elevates the goal beyond simply making yourself understood.
Oh, definitely. Getting the point across with broken grammar and simple words is communication, but it is not pristine.
Right.
Pristine clarity demands a crystalline precision of thought that leaves absolutely zero room for ambiguity, delivered with a physical and emotional poise that inherently commands respect from the listener.
To conceptualize the physical reality of overcoming this specific plateau, we really have to move away from the way most learners view vocabulary acquisition.
Because the vast majority of learners stuck at B2 view the journey to C2 as a volume problem.
Yes. They imagine their brain as a glass of water that is only 3/4 full. They operate under the assumption that if they just memorize 500 more advanced words, if they just pour more volume into the glass, they will finally overflow into C2 mastery.
But the core premise of John and Emma's text is that the volume problem has already been solved.
The passive vocabulary is already vast. The glass is already completely full.
Right.
Overcoming the B2 plateau is not about adding more water. It is about recognizing that the existing water is in the wrong state of matter.
Oh, I like this.
The vast passive vocabulary is currently frozen solid. It is a block of ice, it's rigid, it's immobile, and you physically cannot pour it out of your mouth when you need it in a spontaneous conversation.
Because it's frozen.
Exactly. What this entire pod zone methodology actually represents: the physical phonetic gymnastics, the psychological anchoring against stress, the absurd kitchen narration, the hypervigilant commute observation, is the systematic application of heat.
Application of heat. Wow.
The curriculum is a highly engineered process for thawing the ice. It transforms that rigid, inaccessible passive knowledge into a liquid state. The vocabulary becomes fluid, spontaneous, organic, and ready to flow with pristine clarity the exact millisecond you tip the glass in that boardroom.
The physics of that analogy align perfectly with the final thesis John and Emma present to the learner. Because applying heat, fundamentally changing the state of matter from ice to liquid, is not an instantaneous magical event.
You can't just throw it in the microwave.
You cannot microwave advanced language acquisition. As Emma explicitly states in her closing remarks, true eloquence is forged slowly, deliberately, and consistently.
So it's the daily repetition.
Yes. It is the relentless daily application of these micro-habits, the centering breath every morning in the kitchen, the 10% observational shift during every commute, the deliberate deployment of the tailored suit in every micro-interaction that eventually generates enough cumulative heat to result in that quantum leap from passive understanding to elite active articulation.
So as we synthesize the entirety of this deep dive into John and Emma's masterclass, we can extract a very concrete toolkit.
Let's recap it.
The methodology demands physical shadowing, where the learner does not merely echo sounds, but actively calibrates the lungs, vocal folds, and articulatory muscles to the specific biomechanical demands of advanced English phonetics. It requires the psychological deployment of linguistic anchors using C2-level affirmations to violently lower the affective filter and trick the nervous system into a state of relaxed confidence.
And the toolkit also mandates the practice of quotidian narration, deliberately forcing the brain to maintain cognitive presence by applying the most sophisticated, heavy vocabulary available to the lowest stakes, mundane activities, thereby safely building automaticity.
And finally, it utilizes intentional observation. transforming the passive dead time of a commute into an active laboratory where the learner scrupulously analyzes the architectural hinges of native speech and endeavors to steal and incorporate those structures.
It is a cohesive, aggressive system for constructing that intellectual sanctuary where ideas can flow unimpeded.
But as we close this analysis, there's a final, highly provocative philosophical thread running underneath John and Emma's methodology that I think is really worth exploring.
Okay, lay it on me.
We have spent this entire deep dive analyzing how this system repairs and elevates your language skills. But consider the profound psychological impact of quotidian narration on the rest of your life. Think about the physical act of standing alone in your kitchen.
The act of preparing your morning sustenance.
Right. Neurolinguistics strongly suggests that the language we use does not merely describe our reality. It actively shapes the boundaries and the texture of our reality.
Sure.
So what happens to the human brain when you permanently stop narrating your daily existence with basic utilitarian automatic words and consciously choose to deploy highly elevated, sophisticated vocabulary for your most trivial tasks? When your morning commute is no longer just the depressing reality of going to work, but becomes the act of navigating ambient conditions with tranquil efficiency.
It completely reframes the experience.
Exactly. If you systematically wrap the entirely ordinary, mundane moments of your life in the tailored suit of elite, pristine language, does it merely improve your English proficiency? Or does it fundamentally elevate how you perceive the inherent value, the dignity, and the beauty of your own daily existence?
It is a staggering implication. It suggests that by taking total control over the articulation of our lives, we are actively re-engineering our capacity to appreciate the depth of those lives.
A profound mechanism for both eloquence and existence. Something to heavily contemplate the next time you're standing in the kitchen, slowly coaxing the absolute pinnacle of pristine clarity out of a stubborn teabag.